emphasize for me musically what I think is actually coming, where I feel this resurgence of rock and roll.
You think the guitar riff is coming back?
Yes, I do. And I think because bands aren't afraid to actually go back and take stuff from what worked.
Yep.
And yet they're adding a very modern, contemporary influence to it. And I think rock and roll fell into this kind of very odd category where you had to be completely original and dissect whatever rock and roll was. And that's not what rock and roll started from. It was 3-chord blues progressions, and it's been repeated and repeated, and it's about adding your new contemporary ideas to it. And I'm watching that happen, and I'm again, bands like Kings of Leon are making that happen, and I hope Billy Boy on Poison.
How's your dad?
He's good, man. He's good.
You know, I just,
You say that like you haven't seen.
well,
We used to hang out. Well, Dad.
No,
that
I'm-
wouldn't surprise me.
Being your old man, you know.
Kind of asking because ask it that way because I realized somewhere along the line in the last, and I've just been you know Donald Sutherland. You've seen him in this and everything, and I was watching that show, Dirty Sexy Money,
Oh, yeah.
which has I guess been canceled, unfortunately. But
A lot of things failed, and it was mainly because of the writer's strike, and television, in all fairness, lost 40% of its viewership. But it was a cool show.
for some reason on that show, I said to myself, "Geez, Donald Sutherland can really act."
Yes. Yeah.
There was just something about him in that context where you would see other younger actors kind of around him doing okay, but then there's Donald Sutherland, and you go, "Wow,
Yeah, no, when
that
you
man
when you work
outclasses him."
when you work with someone like that, he's a difficult cat to dance with because
Yeah.
you're talking about probably one of the most prolific actors in the English language. When you go back into the 70s, when the American film movement was at its peak, you're talking about a guy who did 1900 with Bertolucci, and Robert De Niro co-starred, Fellini's Casanova, MASH, Don't Look Now with
One of my all-time favorite movies. Don't Look Now, with Julie Christie, Nicholas Roeg. Wow,
fantastic film. I think, I always categorize movies, film, and cinema separately. Cinema being high art, movies being for fun, and film kind of being right in the middle. I have made some bombs, I have made a few movies, and I have done some film. My father has done cinema, and when you take just those films, Fellini's Casanova, Nick Roeg's Don't Look Now, and Bertolucci's 1900, I would be hard-pressed to find other actors in the English language that are still alive working that can say that.
Yeah, not many.
I don't think your dad listens to this show. You don't have to suck up to him.
No, I'm not. It's actually I'm paying penance because, I grew up with my mother, who was a phenomenal theater actress, and I was dragged with my sister, to the theater every night. We would finish school. We would do our homework at the theater when she was finishing her performance, and then we'd go home. So I was so aware of her work, and I knew my father was famous, but I wasn't fully aware because there was no VHS, there was no DVDs, and his films were not child appropriate. So I'd never seen anything he'd ever done. So I knew he was famous, but I didn't know what he did. And then all of a sudden, I was working as an actor, and I was 18, and VHS came out. And a friend of my dad's that I was going to visit in California when I was moving out there, I stayed at his place, and he had all of his films. And, he had a collection of, 300 movies. And in one night, I watched, I think, Ash Kelly's Heroes, The Dirty Dozen, and The Dirty Dozen, which I was just born on. I was born on that movie. And then Eye of the Needle and Ordinary People.
Oh man!
And so I was watching this cross section of work of this actor, and I was so embarrassed as his son to not know
Clute.
what. Yeah, I mean, just
Jeez.
that kind of stuff. I was so embarrassed to not know what he had done that I phoned him up, and it was really kind of the beginning of a new relationship for us. And I started to apologize, and I think I could hear him kind of, well, you don't have to do that, son.
Aww.
And then I just fell apart. And then he was doing a film in England at the time, and I ended up going to see him about a month after that. But it was so, when I talk about him as an actor, I kind of always pay penance to the fact that I wasn't aware of this as I believe I should have been as his son.
Space
growing
cowboy.
up.
Space
That's right.
Well, Space cowboy.
But what's really cool about that was that came out of Kelly's Heroes, and I'll always love Clint Eastwood for this. Clint Eastwood's a loyal cat, and my dad wasn't working a lot at that time, and Clint Eastwood cast him in it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty cool.
And let's not forget Animal House, where he shows his ass. That's,
and
he got in a lot of trouble for that, man.
He does in Space Cowboys too,
Oh,
which
he
is
does?
why I thought of that. Yeah. There's a scene of them. I think they're all standing there.
how's it holding up?
Cool.
See, it's a lot different. It's a lot different with 6 other guys,
Yeah.
and you're part of NASA,
Yeah.
as opposed to a pot-smoking professor walking across the path of a 16-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he got in a lot of trouble for that. He's been married to Francine Rosette for, 30-some-odd years. And it was the one time I heard her she almost took his ass away.
That's funny. Now, you've grown up around the business. I mean,
Well, I didn't. Again, I grew up in Canada.
Yeah.
I grew up around the theater.
well, that's what I mean. Acting has always been there.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just trying to imagine having what is defined as a regular life.
Oh,
just
I have had anything but a
Yeah.
regular life.
Pretty
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah.
Can we ask you a couple questions about 24?
Sure, yeah.
and then we'll drop it.
I'm curious.
And then we'll go back to my regular life.
We will.
I'm curious as to your political leanings
You know what? I
in
would just say
relationship to that show.
they're very separate. They're
That's
very
the kind of
separate.
thought.
And you have to understand my family's history. My grandfather was the first, he was Premier of Saskatchewan for 18 years. He was the first socialist to come to power in North America. He was responsible for implementing the healthcare system in Canada back in the late 40s, early 50s.
You mean that healthcare system that nobody likes in Canada?
That's right.
That they're all dying to come to America?
Except for Canadians, yeah.
Yeah.
So my political history, the way I was raised and what I grew up in was considerably left. Why I don't talk about it is because I think that 24 is really interesting. It's been politicized by an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton on one end saying it's their favorite show, and you have John McCain on the other side saying it's his favorite show. And that's a part of the show that I love. And when I take a look at someone like Jack Bauer, he's apolitical. Those people
He's doing a job.
Their job is to protect the president. You don't see the detail from the Secret Service being shifted over from president to president. They will take a bullet, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
When Ronald Reagan was shot, the chief surgeon at that hospital said, "I should not do the surgery because I am a registered Democrat." And they said, "You're a doctor first. Read the Hippocratic Oath and get your ass in the operating room." And and he was obviously I'm trying to make a joke, but he was obviously very scared in case something went wrong.
Yeah.
He would be
that
blamed
people would
for
think
yeah.
that he did it for.
I get it.
Jack Bauer is a really apolitical character, so I kind of keep stuff, whatever my personal views, to myself, and there's a reason why they put a curtain over the voting booth. We all have our right to keep that to ourselves.
Yeah, I think I have a hard time watching the show because it seems so fascist to me.
Why? Let's have this discussion.
It's
Because we had the first African American president.
Yeah.
We indicted a Republican president, and now we have the first female president. And in the context of all of this, you have to remember it's a television show, and a lot of the things that we're doing are dramatic devices. For instance,
it's
the
entertainment.
torture.
Yeah, it's entertainment.
And we use the torture, and you have to remember this is all written 2 years before the terrible events of 9/11. So the fact that the world kind of became this reality that actually coincided with what we were doing in the show is a tragedy. But we were using the torture in the show as a device, as a dramatic device, to show you how urgent a situation was. And that was it. How it's been, again, politicized by specific groups from West Point to the Democratic Party to the Republican Party for their own specific interests. What happened in Abu Ghraib and what happens in Guantanamo Bay The fact that we can get tied in the middle of that, if our armed forces are behaving based on a television show, we have a much greater problem than we thought.
Well,